Watch how a distinguished Marine general, the body of a fallen soldier, and a denied boarding pass ignited a national uproar. The terminal buzzed with activity. Vacationing families pulling their luggage, professionals engrossed in their devices, and children darting around weary parents, the typical airport scene. General Eleanor Vance entered, her polished boots clicking on the floor tiles. This procedure was familiar, yet today carried a profound weight. The heaviness she felt wasn't solely from the decorations on her uniform. It stemmed from the flag-draped coffin on the runway, bearing the remains of Lance Corporal Samuel Peterson, only 19, his life tragically cut short. General Vance straightened her cap and inhaled deeply, focused on her solemn duty, one transcending rank or recognition. It wasn't about her, it was about the solemn vow to every service member who wouldn't return home. No one is left behind. She approached the airline agent, placing her official orders and identification on the counter. The attendant, initially preoccupied, typed on her computer, a frown creasing her brow before she finally looked up. A noticeable pause. "Ma'am, could I see that again?" Her voice held a tremor. General Vance handed over the documents, observing her closely. The brief hesitation, the glance at a colleague, the subtle shift in posture as if facing an unexpected challenge. The agent whispered to another employee, who glanced over, his expression unreadable. The moment stretched, filled with a familiar discomfort. Upon her return, the agent's smile felt strained. "Marem, I'm so sorry, but there appears to be an issue with your ticket. We cannot permit you to board at this time." General Vance exhaled slowly. She had navigated complex situations, international crises, diplomatic negotiations, political intricacies, but this felt different. "I am escorting the remains of a fallen Marine," she stated calmly, indicating the paperwork. "Everything is in order." The agent avoided eye contact. "I understand, ma'am, but there's a security regulation in place that we cannot bypass." General Vance maintained her composure. "Security regulation?" "Yes, ma'am," the agent replied, forcing a weak smile. "It's company policy." General Vance stood her ground, unwavering. "Policy? Which policy?" Behind her, the queue lengthened, people shifted restlessly, their murmurs growing. She felt their gaze, but instead of yielding, she stood taller, resolute. She wouldn't leave without a clear explanation. However, the airline personnel remained firm. The atmosphere around the desk thickened. Conversations in the line behind her began to fade as onlookers took notice. A high-ranking officer in uniform being denied passage was an unusual sight. General Vance remained composed, her voice steady. "Ma'am, I need a precise explanation of the issue. This is an official military assignment, not personal travel. My credentials are valid." The agent hesitated once more, her eyes flicking towards the other airline staff huddled in the back, whispering. A supervisor, a woman in her late 40s with a weary look, finally approached. She adjusted her name tag and crossed her arms as she looked at General Vance. "General, I apologize for the inconvenience," she began, her tone conveying practiced politeness aimed at deflecting further questions. "However, we have established procedures, and unfortunately, we are unable to make exceptions at this time." That familiar word again. Procedures. General Vance inhaled slowly, a familiar feeling of bureaucratic obstruction rising within her. "I have accompanied military escorts on flights before," she stated, her frustration held in check by years of training. "I am familiar with the protocol, and there is no regulation preventing my boarding. So, let's be candid, what is the actual reason for this denial?" The supervisor cleared her throat and shifted her weight. "It's merely an additional security precaution. Nothing personal, General. Nothing personal." That statement felt disingenuous. General Vance tightened her jaw, suppressing her rising anger. She had been in countless situations where people concealed the truth behind vague justifications. They were testing her resolve, waiting for her to lose her temper, to provide a pretext for intervention. She wouldn't grant them that satisfaction. The people in line were now observing intently. A gentleman in a blue blazer whispered to his wife. A young woman clutching her boarding pass frowned, looking at the airline staff as if trying to decipher the situation. Then, A voice broke through the tension. "Excuse me, is there a problem with her military authorization?" General Vance turned her head slightly. A man a few places back in line had spoken. He appeared to be in his early 60s, with a lined face and a Navy veteran cap pulled low on his forehead, a fellow service member. The supervisor appeared flustered. "No, sir, it's not about authorization. We simply must adhere to standard operating procedures." The Navy veteran let out a short laugh. "Yeah, I've been through airport security countless times, and I've never seen protocol stop a service member from bringing one of our own home." He folded his arms. "So, what's the real hold-up?" More murmurs rippled through the line. People began taking out their phones, recording. The change in the atmosphere was palpable. The staff behind the counter could sense it too. The agent who had initially denied General Vance glanced at her supervisor, now looking uncertain. The supervisor sighed, rubbing her forehead. She looked at General Vance again, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "Let me double-check something," she mumbled before walking away. The agent at the counter kept her eyes down, feigning intense interest in her computer screen. General Vance remained still, standing tall, shoulders back, looking straight ahead. She wasn't going anywhere, and neither was this story. The murmur in the terminal was no longer just background noise. It was focused, intense. People in line were no longer just waiting for their flights. They were watching, documenting. The Navy veteran who had spoken earlier wasn't the only one showing displeasure. A middle-aged woman in a leather jacket, clutching her handbag, shook her head and leaned towards her companion. "This is outrageous," she muttered. "She's in uniform." A younger man in a baseball cap pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. Public attention was growing, a dangerous development for the airline. General Vance maintained an impassive expression, but inwardly, she noted every detail. The supervisor hadn't yet returned, suggesting either a frantic search for an excuse or a hope that the situation would de-escalate on its own. Neither was likely. Then, a voice came from behind her. "Excuse me." General Vance turned her head slightly. A young woman, appearing no older than 22, stood a few feet away, phone in hand, her eyes a mix of uncertainty and determination. I don't mean to interfere, but I just want to be sure I understand. They're not allowing you to board." Her voice wasn't loud, but her careful, deliberate phrasing drew even more attention from those nearby. General Vance exhaled, glancing at the agent behind the counter. "That is correct." The young woman blinked, as if expecting a different response. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded once and turned her phone screen towards General Vance. "I'm live streaming right now," she said. "People need to see this." And just like that, the situation exploded. Another man raised his phone. "This is unacceptable," he said, shaking his head. "This officer is literally escorting a fallen hero." A woman further back raised her voice. "Hey, excuse me." She waved her hand towards the counter. "Can someone explain why she's being denied?" A few people shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure about getting involved, but the energy in the room had shifted. What began as quiet murmurs had escalated into something significant, something the airline staff could no longer ignore. The agent behind the counter looked as though she wanted to disappear, her hands hovering over the keyboard, her eyes darting to the camera lenses pointed her way. Then, the Navy veteran from before stepped forward, his patience exhausted. "I've witnessed many things in my life," he said, his voice steady and firm. "But I never imagined I'd see the day an American service member, especially one escorting the remains of a fellow warrior, would be treated like this." The terminal had become eerily silent. Even the usual airport announcements seemed distant and muffled. The only sound was the recording notifications from the numerous phones capturing every second of the unfolding drama. The Navy veteran stood taller. "This is a disgrace." The agent swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she typed on her keyboard again. The supervisor was still nowhere in sight. Passengers whispered. A young child whimpered in their stroller, but the parent, instead of comforting the child, was intently looking at their phone, reading something with an expression of disgust. Then, from the back of the line, a man muttered, "It's already trending online." General Vance remained still, not needing to move. The world was now watching. The tension in the terminal was palpable. The supervisor was still absent, the airline staff locked in an awkward silence. Phones were out, recording, posting, and streaming. Then, like a match igniting dry tinder, the news spread. The young man in the baseball cap, still glued to his phone, let out a low whistle. Wow, this is everywhere now. General Vance showed no reaction, knowing better than to celebrate prematurely, but the way the agent behind the counter stiffened indicated she understood the gravity of the situation. The woman in the leather jacket checked her phone and gasped. "Oh my goodness," she whispered to her companion. "It's already all over social media." The older Navy veteran grunted, pulling out his own phone. They have no idea the storm they just created. Then, as if on cue, the airport's public address system crackled to life. "Attention passengers, due to unforeseen circumstances, Flight 412 to Seattle will experience a delay. We apologize for any inconvenience." A few groans rippled through the crowd, but most people were no longer paying attention. Their focus remained on the uniformed general being denied her flight while fulfilling her duty. A minute later, a young woman near the windows exclaimed, "It's on X." She turned her screen towards the crowd, and people leaned in. A post written in bold capital letters read, "Just witnessed a black U.S. Marine general denied boarding while escorting a fallen hero's remains. Is this how we honor our defenders?" Hashtag let her fly below the post. The numbers were rapidly increasing. Reposts, comments, likes. It was going viral. Then another post appeared, this one from a veteran support organization. "We are aware of the shameful incident at airport name. Our service members deserve respect. Expect action." The crowd murmured, the realization sinking in. The airline had officially lost control of the narrative. The agent behind the counter, still frozen, let out a shaky breath. She turned and hurried towards the back, disappearing behind a frosted glass door. She wasn't returning with an explanation, but with damage control instructions. General Vance straightened her cap. She had faced similar situations before, not in an airport, not quite like this, but in settings where powerful individuals suddenly realized they had made a grave error. She didn't smile or gloat because, ultimately, this wasn't about her. It was about Lance Corporal Samuel Peterson, the young Marine waiting to be brought home, and at that moment, that mission was still incomplete. The crowd was no longer just observing. They were waiting. The terminal's atmosphere had shifted, now charged with anticipation. Then, the supervisor finally returned, but she wasn't alone. A second person accompanied her, a man in a sharp charcoal suit, his airline identification badge neatly clipped to his lapel. His stride was purposeful, controlled, like someone accustomed to resolving crises. He stopped just before the counter, surveying the scene. His eyes moved swiftly between General Vance, the Navy veteran, and the numerous phones still recording. He cleared his throat. "General, I apologize for the misunderstanding. There appears to have been a system error, but we are working to get you on your flight as quickly as possible." Misunderstanding. General Vance had served long enough to understand the true meaning behind such words. We were caught. Fix this before it costs us dearly. She didn't respond immediately, letting the silence hang, observing the airline representative shift uncomfortably under its weight. "I understand," General Vance finally said, her voice calm. "A system error, you say?" "Yes, General, a regrettable oversight. We assure you it was unintentional." A few people in the crowd scoffed. The Navy veteran shook his head. The airline representative adjusted his tie, visibly uneasy. "We would like to personally escort you to your gate now, General. First-class seating, of course." First class, as if that addressed the core issue. General Vance looked past the man towards the counter where the agent still stood, avoiding eye contact. The same agent who had offered a forced smile while denying her boarding, the same one who hadn't bothered to verify the situation before saying no. General Vance exhaled slowly. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I need to be clear about something." The representative nodded quickly. "Certainly." General Vance's voice remained steady. If no one had recorded this, if no one had spoken out, would I still be standing here? A moment of silence. The representative swallowed. General, You don't need to answer, General Vance interrupted. She already knew the answer. Everyone in the terminal did. Another silent moment passed. Then a woman in the crowd murmured, "She's right." The representative attempted to defuse the tension. "General, we sincerely apologize." "We both know this isn't about an apology," General Vance stated. "It's about accountability." The crowd murmured in agreement. People were no longer just angry. They were disappointed. The representative knew he was losing control of the situation. He straightened his posture, adopting a more authoritative tone. "General, let's get you to your gate now." But before General Vance could reply, a new voice intervened. "Sir." A younger man in an airport police uniform had appeared at the side of the counter, holding out a phone towards the airline representative, his expression serious. "I think you should see this." The representative frowned, taking the phone. He scrolled, his face paling. The Navy veteran crossed his arms. "What? Something wrong?" The representative didn't answer, but General Vance already suspected the news. The backlash had officially spread beyond the airport. A major news channel had picked up the story. The headline was stark: U.S. Marine General denied flight while escorting fallen comrade. Airline faces scrutiny. Below it, a video clip played footage from the terminal. The representative handed back the phone, inhaled sharply, and turned to General Vance. "We deeply regret this situation." His voice was now strained and insincere. "We would like to issue a public statement clarifying." General Vance cut him off. "The public already knows the truth." Silence. The representative pressed his lips together. General Vance looked at the crowd, at the phone still recording. She turned back to the representative. "I don't need first class. I don't need special treatment. I need respect, and so does the Marine I am escorting." Another murmur rippled through the crowd. The representative gave a stiff nod, as if that was the only response he could manage. "Understood, General." The Navy veteran let out a quiet, approving grunt. General Vance adjusted her cap. "Now, let's complete this mission." But the repercussions for the airline were just beginning. The airline had lost control of the narrative. The story was out, spreading rapidly. The terminal now resembled a press conference, with phones still recording and passengers still watching. Then, an unexpected event occurred. A man in a dark suit, exuding an air of genuine authority, entered the scene. He wasn't with the airline or airport security. He was military. The room shifted as people instinctively made way for him. His identification badge flashed briefly as he approached General Vance and extended his hand. "General," he said firmly, "I'm Colonel Marcus Thorne, United States Marine Corps. We've been informed of the situation." General Vance shook his hand, his grip firm. She didn't need to ask how Colonel Thorne had arrived so quickly. The Marine Corps takes care of its own. Thorne turned to the airline representative, his voice sharp. "We are taking over from here. General Vance and the remains of Lance Corporal Peterson will not be flying commercial." The representative blinked. Sir, you were just about to manage the damage," Thorne interrupted, his tone polite but firm. He glanced at General Vance. "General, the Department of Defense has arranged a private military transport. Your flight is waiting." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. People exchanged knowing glances. The U.S. Marine Corps had intervened. General Vance exhaled, not out of a need for rescue, but with the satisfaction that the mission was back on track. She gave a small nod. "Understood, Colonel." Thorne's gaze flicked towards the airline representative one last time. "This will be addressed." It wasn't a threat, but a clear promise. General Vance turned back to the Navy veteran who had observed the entire exchange with satisfaction. "Thank you for your support," General Vance said. The veteran nodded. "We always look out for our own." General Vance gave the room one final look, acknowledging the people who had spoken up, who had refused to let injustice prevail, who had ensured this story was heard. She adjusted her uniform, straightened her shoulders, and walked out, not towards the commercial gate, but towards a larger purpose. For the airline, however, the consequences were just starting. The airline believed the incident would fade with a few apologies, a press release, and perhaps a statement from their CEO, standard damage control. But the public was not letting it go. News outlets covered the story extensively, veterans organizations issued strong condemnations of the airline's actions, and politicians voiced their opinions, demanding accountability. Then came the financial impact. By the end of the following week, the airline's stock value had plummeted. A trending hashtag calling for a boycott gained significant traction. Customers flooded the airline's social media platforms with demands for answers. And then, the decisive blow, a lawsuit. A coalition of military support groups filed a formal complaint against the airline for discrimination and failure to uphold the rights of service members. Under intense pressure, the airline's CEO made a public apology, calling the incident a regrettable misunderstanding, and announcing the temporary suspension of the involved employees. It was too little, too late. Meanwhile, General Vance continued her mission. She escorted Lance Corporal Samuel Peterson home, standing with dignity as the young Marine's family received their son for the final time. She didn't seek headlines or attention. She sought respect, and that was the true battle. Respect should be inherent, not contingent on viral videos or public outcry. It should be the standard. The people at that airport, the Navy veteran, the passengers who spoke out, those who refused to remain silent, demonstrated a crucial truth. When individuals unite against injustice, it has no place to hide. If you believe in accountability, if you believe in honoring those who serve, make your voice heard, because silence allows such incidents to recur, and the next time it might not gain public attention. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to mistreat you or take advantage of you? Let's talk about it. Share your experiences and how you dealt with the situation in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want more content on inspiring Black stories channel like this, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, your strength is greater than you think.